GGG just released their manifesto for their upcoming Siege of the Atlas expansion, so I thought I'd make a quick overview of the entire manifesto so you wouldn't have to sit through a 35-minute video of somebody reacting to every single line. Absolution now deals more damage. Holy shit. Arc now deals more damage. Holy shit. Bladefall deals more damage. Holy shit. So let's get started. Hit-based spellcasting. You've asked and they've listened. Essentially, this entire section is saying that self-casting abilities should be in a much better place than before. They've achieved this by adjusting the numbers on numerous skill gems, but in the process, nerfed totem, trap, and mine supports to compensate for the increase in damage to said skills. Don't worry, they made sure to increase the damage of some trap and totem skills themselves to adjust for the nerfs to their respective support gems. I didn't see any buffs to mine skills like Icicle Mine or Stormblast Mine though, so these skills might be indirectly nerfed, or it's possible that the builds that use these skills just don't use high impact mine support, so they will be unaffected. They also increased cast speed modifiers on items and made it possible to get increased cast speed mods on runic daggers, hopefully opening different avenues and options for builds when gearing. Another major change listed in this section is the massive nerf to Unleash support. GGG thought it was too impactful for builds that would utilize all the previously mentioned buffs, so they nerfed it accordingly. Several unique threshold jewels have been removed and some have been changed in functionality. The skills that relied on the jewels that were removed have been buffed to compensate for their removal. One of the changes to a threshold jewel that I found interesting was the one for Spark. It no longer makes Spark fire 2 additional projectiles, but instead fires Spark's projectiles in a circle around the character. Orb of Storms has been redesigned as a single target tool for lightning casters. It doesn't hit as often now, but every time the caster casts a lightning spell within Orb of Storm's area, it will zap an enemy in range. This sounds like it has a lot of potential for high cast speed lightning builds, and if you could balance the mana cost required to maintain something like Sigil of Power on top of this, then you just might be cooking with fire. And lastly for this section, Ignite has been slightly nerfed to compensate for the buffs to mini spells, but generally this is a slight buff. Mini skills like Burning Arrow, Armageddon Brand, and Explosive Arrow have received buffs to adjust for the nerf to Ignite. Oh, and a new mechanic for Ignite damage with melee attack skills will be introduced to give unconventional Ignite builds an option for enhancing Ignites. Does this mean I'll finally be able to make that Earthquake Ignite chieftain of my dreams? Hit-based bow attacks. Once again, you've asked many times, and they have finally listened. Hit-based bow attacks are receiving a buff through things like local damage modifiers on weapons, increasing the damage of bows in general, some of which have been increased by up to 50% more than before, and mastery and quiver adjustments. I personally like all the changes to quivers here, because I've always felt like rare quivers were barely used unless they rolled with insane modifiers on them. The increased elemental damage with attack skills on quivers has been changed to increased damage with bow skills to apply to physical and chaos damage builds as well. They've also reworked quiver progression with the addition of new quiver types with a more diverse range of useful implicits. And this specific change I found to be one of the more exciting changes within this section, and that is the +1 arrow prefix has now been added to the core modifier pool for quivers and removed from influenced quivers.
How neat is that? That's pretty neat.
Sources of added damage. Added damage support gems such as added cold, lightning, and chaos gems have been nerfed, but local added damage on weapons have been slightly buffed accordingly. That's it. I think we all knew this next change was coming, and that is skill interactions with Hydrosphere. Basically, that shit was OP before, and now it isn't. The end. Triggering marks. And no, I'm not talking about the male equivalent of Karen's. I'm of course referring to mark skills like Sniper's Mark or Poacher's Mark. Essentially, applying marks through unique items or mark on hit skills were way more efficient for clearing and boss fights, making it poopy for builds that didn't have access to these tools, but still wanted to benefit from utilizing a marked skill. So they've added a new support gem that doesn't need to be linked to your primary skill that applies marks to rare and unique targets. In addition to this, they've also made mark skills permanent, so self-casting in boss fight scenarios doesn't feel anywhere near as punishing. All good stuff here. Fortification and damage reduction. Since fortification stacks scale off the damage dealt, there were certain monsters with high damage reduction, making it very difficult to gain fortification stacks. To counteract this, fortification generation now ignores the target's damage reduction. I think this is great and all, but I noticed a lot of people complaining about damage over time builds and other attack-based builds that weren't hitting very hard, thus unable to get enough fortification stacks, and this change here doesn't address those problems. But it seems like GGG is okay with the way fortification is working currently. Skill balance. Detonate Dead, Seismic Trap, and Toxic Rain have been adjusted. I doubt that the changes to Detonate Dead and Toxic Rain are significant enough to make them unplayable, but the changes to Seismic Trap may have made it way less overpowered. To be honest, I would have no idea though, because I don't typically play meta builds. I'm a filthy mustache twirling, Polaroid taken hipster. And the last section is Unique Item Balance. March of the Legion has been adjusted to give you one blessing and changed so that the skill costs mana instead of temporarily reserving mana. These changes highlighted a bunch of problems with other mechanics that required attention. As such, the blessing for March of the Legion has been added as a support gem, which is pretty freaking nifty. Mortal Conviction has been moved, and there has been a Mortal Conviction-like support gem that makes an aura free but prevents you from reserving mana. Slight nerfs to Shroud of the Lightless and the Strength of the Blood Keystone from the Lethal Pride Jewel as well. Basically, players were getting immunity to damage from both these items, and now you can't do that shit no more. As many of you have seen on Twitter already, the Dancing Dervish unique has been altered so that you can gain rampage on melee hits rather than kills, making it easier to sustain in boss fights. The fortification buffs granted by the unique Perfidy armor have been changed to grant additional stacks of fortification, rather than increased fortification duration. And lastly, Void Fletcher is too strong. They are nerfing that shit, but no additional details have been given. And that's it, folks. Hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to like and subscribe. And remember, try to live more than I do.